The message arrived at 3:47 a.m. Earth Standard Time. It came not as words or data, but as absence. The Meridian 7 colony, home to 2.3 million human souls, had simply stopped talking. Captain Elena Vasquez of the scout ship Wanderer was the first to arrive. She had been running a routine patrol 3 systems away when the silence began. Now she stood on her bridge, staring at the view screen, and she could not make herself believe what she was seeing. The planet below had once been green and blue. She had visited Meridian 7 twice before. She remembered the sprawling cities, the agricultural zones that fed a dozen nearby outposts, the children playing in parks under an alien sun. She remembered the smell of the bakeries in New Helsinki, the sound of music drifting from the entertainment district in Port Armstrong. None of it remained. The planet was gray now, gray and brown and black. The oceans had boiled away. The atmosphere was a choking soup of ash and poison. Where cities once stood, there was only scorched earth. Where forests once grew, there was only glass created by heat beyond imagination. "Are there any survivors?" Vasquez asked. Her voice was steady. She was proud of that. Her sensor officer, a young man named Park, worked his console with shaking hands. "No life signs, Captain. No artificial signals. No underground shelters responding. Nothing." "Nothing," Vasquez repeated. She had served in the Terran Navy for 23 years. She had seen combat. She had watched friends die. But she had never seen anything like this. This was not war. This was not conquest. This was erasure. Someone had looked at 2.3 million people and decided they should not exist anymore. "Captain," Park said, "I'm picking up residual energy signatures. The weapons used here, they match Veth Dominion technology." Vasquez closed her eyes. The Veth. Of course it was the Veth. The Veth Dominion had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 12,000 years. They were old when humanity was still learning to make fire. They controlled 900 worlds and commanded fleets beyond counting. They looked upon younger species the way humans once looked upon insects. Humanity had met them 40 years ago. The Veth had made their position clear from the first contact. Humans were vermin. They were pollution. They were a temporary annoyance that would be dealt with when the time was right. Apparently, the time had become right. "Send everything to Earth Command," Vasquez said. "Full sensor logs, visual recordings. Everything." "Captain, if the Veth did this, and they see our transmission, then they already know we're here." Vasquez turned to face her crew. 15 people, all of them pale with shock. "Our job now is to bear witness. The galaxy needs to know what happened here. Earth needs to know." She looked back at the dead world on her view screen. Somewhere down there, beneath the ash and ruin, were the remains of everything those people had built. Their homes, their dreams, their children. "Earth needs to know," she said again, quieter this time. "And Earth needs to remember." The message reached Earth 17 hours later. It arrived in the middle of the night, filtered through relay stations across 1,000 light-years of space. By morning, every human being alive knew what had happened. The reaction was not what the galaxy expected. Other species, when wounded like this, screamed for blood. They sent angry fleets charging toward their enemies. They burned with visible rage and made terrible mistakes. This was how young species died. The Veth had seen it 100 times before, but humanity did not scream. In cities across Earth and her colonies, people gathered in silence. They held vigils. They lit candles. They spoke the names of the dead, all 2.3 million of them, reading from lists that took days to complete. And behind the grief, something else grew. Something cold. Something patient. Something that had waited inside humanity since the first tribe looked at the stars and wondered what was waiting there. The United Terran Assembly met in emergency session. The chamber was full, every seat occupied by representatives from every human world. They listened to Captain Vasquez's report. They watched the footage from her sensors. They saw the dead planet that had once held millions of their people. Then they voted. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in 300 years of spacefaring history, humanity authorized the full mobilization of the reserve fleets. Most of the galaxy did not even know these fleets existed. Humanity had built them quietly over centuries, in shipyards hidden in the hearts of dead stars and the depths of gas giants. They were the ships humanity hoped would never be needed, the ships built for the day when patience and diplomacy finally failed. 200,000 warships, each one armed with weapons that humanity had never revealed to the galaxy. Each one crewed by soldiers who had trained in secret for exactly this moment. Admiral Yuki Tanaka received command of the combined fleet 3 days after the destruction of Meridian 7. She was 61 years old, a career officer who had spent her life preparing for a war she hoped would never come. Now it had come, and she would lead humanity's response. She stood in the command center of her flagship, the Remembrance, and looked at the tactical display. 200,000 ships organized into 100 battle groups, the largest fleet ever assembled by any species in galactic history. "Admiral," her aide said, "the fleet is ready. All ships report green across the board." Tanaka nodded. She had spent the last 72 hours reviewing intelligence reports, battle plans, and logistics. She knew exactly what the Veth Dominion was capable of. She knew their fleet numbers, their weapon systems, their defensive positions. She knew that the journey to Veth space would take months and would carry her ships through territory controlled by hostile powers. She also knew that none of that mattered. The Veth had made a calculation. They had looked at humanity's visible military power and decided that humans could be crushed without consequence. They had not bothered to learn what humanity was hiding. They had not bothered to understand what humans were truly capable of when pushed too far. They were about to learn. "Open a channel," Tanaka said. "All ships." The communication officer worked his console. A moment later, Tanaka's face appeared on view screens across the entire fleet. 200,000 ships. 3 million crew members, all of them watching, all of them waiting. "This is Admiral Tanaka," she said. "3 days ago, the Veth Dominion murdered 2.3 million of our people. They did not conquer Meridian 7. They did not demand surrender. They simply erased it. Every man, every woman, every child, gone." She paused, letting the words settle. "The Veth believe we are vermin. They believe we are weak. They believe that they can kill our people without consequence, because they have done this to 100 species before us, and none of those species ever made them pay." Her voice hardened. "We are going to teach them otherwise. We are going to cross 4,000 light years of hostile space. We are going to reach the heart of their empire, and we are going to make them understand that humanity is not prey. We are not vermin. We are not something to be brushed aside when convenient." She straightened in her chair, her eyes burning with cold fire. "We are the children of a death world. We evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every day for 3 million years. We survived ice ages and plagues and wars against ourselves. We clawed our way up from the mud and reached for the stars because nothing in the universe could stop us. The Veth believe they are the masters of this galaxy. They believe their 12,000 years of empire make them invincible. But empires fall, powers fade, and when this war is over, the galaxy will remember one truth above all others." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to something barely above a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of every ship. "You do not touch our people. You do not harm our children. You do not burn our worlds and expect to sleep peacefully afterward. We are humanity, and we remember everything." She stood. "All ships, prepare for departure. We make for Veth space at maximum speed. We will not stop until we reach Vethos Prime itself. We will not accept surrender until justice is done." Her final order echoed across the fleet. "We go not to destroy the Veth. We go to teach the galaxy what happens when you mistake human patience for weakness. All ships, engage." 200,000 engines ignited as one. The combined light of their drives was visible from Earth's surface, a new star blazing briefly in the night sky. Billions of people watched it rise, knowing what it meant. Humanity was going to war. Not for conquest, not for glory, not even for revenge, though revenge would be part of it. They were going to war for something simpler and more powerful. They were going to war because 2.3 million people deserved justice, because the dead deserved to be remembered, because some crimes were too great to ignore, and some silences demanded an answer. The fleet disappeared into the darkness between stars, and the galaxy held its breath. The Veth had no idea what was coming. The journey to Veth space would take 4 months. 4 months of travel through the darkness between stars, crossing territories claimed by a dozen different species, many of them hostile to humanity or afraid of the Veth or both. Admiral Tanaka had planned for this. She had studied the maps and the politics. She knew which species would let them pass and which would try to stop them. She knew the choke points and the dangers. What she had not expected was what the fleet would find along the way. The first surprise came 3 weeks into the journey when the fleet entered the territory of the Urani Collective. The Urani were a peaceful species, traders and diplomats who had survived in the galaxy by being useful to everyone and threatening to no one. They had suffered under Veth domination for centuries, paying tribute and enduring insults because the alternative was extinction. When the human fleet appeared at their border, the Urani sent a delegation. Their ambassador was a tall, thin being with silver skin and large dark eyes that seemed to hold endless sadness. "We have heard what happened to your colony," the ambassador said, meeting with Tanaka aboard the Remembrance. "We are sorry for your loss. We know what the Veth are capable of." "Thank you," Tanaka replied. "We are passing through your territory on our way to Veth space. We do not intend to cause you any trouble." The ambassador was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that Tanaka did not expect. "We would like to help." Tanaka blinked. "Help? The Veth have ruled this galaxy through fear for 12,000 years. Every species that tried to stand against them was crushed. We learned to bow. We learned to submit. We learned to pretend that dignity did not matter if survival was at stake." The ambassador's voice trembled slightly. "But you are not bowing. You are not submitting. You are marching to their homeworld with a fleet that makes our entire civilization look like children playing with toys." He leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. "We cannot join your war. We are not warriors, but we can give you supplies. We can give you fuel. We can give you information about Veth fleet movements and defensive positions. And we can tell every species in our network that humanity is not prey, that someone is finally making the Veth answer for their crimes." Tanaka considered this. "The Veth will punish you when they learn what you have done." "Let them try," the ambassador said, and there was something new in his voice, something that might have been hope. "When you reach Vethos Prime, the galaxy will be watching. If you win, everything changes. The Veth will never be able to make us afraid again." The Urani were not the only ones. As the fleet crossed the galaxy, word spread ahead of them. Species that had hidden from the Veth for centuries came forward with offers of help. The Melith, a race of small beings who had been reduced to slaves on their own worlds, provided star charts of Veth territory that no human had ever seen. The crystalline hegemony, ancient rivals of the Veth who had been defeated 1,000 years ago, shared intelligence about weapon systems and defensive weaknesses. Some species simply watched from the shadows, afraid to act but unable to look away. Others whispered prayers in languages humanity had never heard, hoping that these strange, warm-blooded creatures could do what no one else had managed in 12,000 years. The fleet did not stop moving. Every day they crossed light years of empty space. Every night, Tanaka reviewed reports and planned for battles to come. And everywhere they went, they left behind something unexpected. On a Melith colony world, the fleet dropped food and medical supplies to a population that had been starving under Veth occupation. The ships did not ask for anything in return. They did not demand gratitude. They simply gave what was needed and moved on. Word of this spread faster than the fleet itself. The Veth had ruled through terror and greed. They took what they wanted and destroyed what they did not need. The idea of a species that would help strangers without expecting payment was almost beyond comprehension for most of the galaxy. But humanity did it anyway, because that was who they were. Because helping others was not weakness. Because kindness was not the opposite of strength. The Veth High Synod watched these reports with growing unease. They had expected the humans to charge blindly forward, burning everything in their path. That would have been simple. That would have proven that humans were just like every other young species, emotional, violent, easily defeated. Instead, the humans were doing something far more dangerous. They were making friends. The High Synod made their decision. They would not wait for the human fleet to reach their homeworld. They would send their own fleets to intercept and destroy these upstarts in the depths of space, far from any witnesses. 3 Veth battle fleets, each one containing 5,000 warships, set out to meet the human advance. Their commanders were veterans of 100 campaigns against lesser species. They had never lost a battle. They did not expect this one to be any different. They were wrong. The first battle happened in a system with no name, just a number on stellar charts. The Veth fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel, expecting to find the humans scattered and disorganized. Instead, they found a wall of ships waiting for them. Admiral Tanaka had known they were coming. The intelligence provided by the Urani and others had tracked every Veth ship movement. She had prepared the battlefield with precision that the Veth could not understand. The battle lasted 4 hours. The Veth fought with the confidence of a species that had never truly been challenged. They used tactics that had worked for millennia, tactics that assumed their enemies would fight the same way every other species had fought. The humans did not fight that way. Their ships moved in patterns that seemed chaotic but were actually perfectly coordinated. They communicated through encrypted channels that the Veth could not crack. They used electronic warfare to blind Veth sensors at critical moments, and their weapons were far more powerful than anything the Veth had expected from such a young species. When the battle ended, 3,000 Veth ships had been destroyed. The humans had lost 600. The second battle happened 2 weeks later. The Veth sent more ships this time, determined to overwhelm the humans with sheer numbers. The result was the same. The humans fought with coordination that bordered on telepathy, each ship knowing exactly where to be and when to fire. They absorbed losses that would have broken any other fleet and kept fighting. The third battle was the shortest. The Veth fleet commander, seeing what had happened to his colleagues, tried to retreat. The humans did not let him. 18 hours after the first shot was fired, 15,000 Veth ships had been reduced to debris. The human fleet had taken losses, but it kept moving. It did not pause to celebrate. It did not stop to rest. It simply reorganized itself and continued on its course. Admiral Tanaka ordered one Veth commander to be captured and returned to his people. She sent him home with a message. Tell your High Synod that Earth remembers every name, every child, every dream that burned on Meridian 7. We are coming to collect. The commander delivered the message. The High Synod did not respond publicly, but those who knew how to read Veth politics saw something they had never seen before in the halls of power. Fear. The galaxy watched the fleet's progress with a mixture of terror and hope. For 12,000 years, the Veth had seemed invincible. Now a young species was cutting through their forces like fire through dry grass. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had spent their lives bowing to Veth masters began to whisper. Some of them began to plan. Some of them began to hope for the first time in generations. And the human fleet kept coming. They crossed the final border into Veth core territory 2 months after leaving Earth. Behind them lay the wreckage of 3 battle fleets and a galaxy that would never see the Veth the same way again. Ahead of them lay Vethos Prime itself, the heart of the Dominion, defended by the largest concentration of military power in galactic history. Admiral Tanaka stood on the bridge of the Remembrance and looked at the tactical display. 80,000 Veth warships waited at the homeworld. Orbital fortresses that had stood for millennia bristled with weapons. The Veth had gathered everything they had for a final defense. Behind her, Captain Chen spoke quietly. Admiral, intelligence reports that the Veth are offering a ceasefire. They are willing to pay reparations for Meridian 7. How much? 10 trillion credits, and they will return the territory of 3 species they conquered in the last century. Tanaka was silent for a long moment. 10 trillion credits was more money than most species would see in 1,000 years. The return of those territories would save millions of lives, but it was not enough. Rejected, she said. The price for 2.3 million souls is not money. It is not territory. It is something the Veth have never had to pay before. What is that? Admiral? Tanaka looked at the homeworld that grew larger on her view screen with every passing hour. The place where the Veth had ruled for 12 millennia. The place where they had planned the destruction of Meridian 7 without a moment of hesitation. Consequences, she said. For 12,000 years, they have done whatever they wanted to, whoever they wanted. That ends now. That ends here. She turned to her communications officer. Signal the fleet, All ships prepare for battle. We finish this tomorrow. The human fleet spread out into attack formation, 200,000 ships moving as one, ready to face the greatest test in human history. The final battle was about to begin. Vethos Prime hung in space like a jewel of impossible beauty. The planet was ancient, its surface covered with cities that had stood for thousands of years. Golden spires reached toward the heavens. Crystal domes glittered in the light of their sun. 100 billion Veth called this world home, and they had never known fear. Until now. Admiral Tanaka studied the planet on her view screen and felt nothing but cold purpose. Somewhere down there, in one of those beautiful buildings, the High Synod had given the order to burn Meridian 7. They had looked at 2.3 million human lives and decided they were worth nothing. They had erased a world without hesitation, without mercy, without a moment of doubt. Now humanity had come to their doorstep, and the Veth were about to learn what it meant to face a species that did not forget. The Veth Defense Fleet filled the space around their homeworld. 80,000 warships, arranged in defensive formations that had been perfected over millennia. Behind them, orbital fortresses bristled with weapons capable of cracking planets. These defenses had never fallen. In 12,000 years, no enemy had ever reached this far. The human fleet faced them with 160,000 ships. They had lost 40,000 on the long march through Veth territory, but those who remained had been forged into something harder than steel. They had fought 3 major battles and dozens of smaller engagements. They knew what the Veth were capable of, and they were not afraid. The Veth High Synod broadcast one final message to the human fleet. The voice that spoke was ancient and filled with contempt. Vermin of Earth, you have fought well for a young species, but your journey ends here. Surrender now and we will grant you a quick death. Continue this foolish attack and we will destroy your fleet, burn your homeworld and hunt your kind to extinction across the galaxy. You have 1 hour to decide. Admiral Tanaka listened to the message in silence. When it finished, she turned to her communications officer. Open a channel to the entire fleet and to the Veth Defense Force. Channel open, Admiral. Tanaka stood, smoothing her uniform. Behind her, every officer on the bridge watched with focused attention. This is Admiral Yuki Tanaka of the United Terran Navy. To the Veth High Synod and all forces defending Vethos Prime, I offer the following response to your ultimatum. She paused for a single heartbeat. Meridian 7. 2,300,000 souls, erased without warning, without mercy, without reason. You called us vermin. You treated our people like insects to be crushed beneath your feet. You thought we would accept this. You thought we would be afraid. Her voice hardened. You were wrong. We are humanity. We do not surrender. We do not forget. And we do not forgive the murder of our children. She looked directly at the view screen, as if she could see through space itself to the halls of the High Synod. Your hour is wasted. We attack now. She cut the channel and turned to her tactical officer. All ships execute attack pattern Alpha 7. Target priority is enemy capital ships and orbital platforms. May God have mercy on their souls because we will not. 160,000 human ships surged forward as one. The Battle of Vethos Prime would be remembered for 1,000 generations. It was the largest naval engagement in galactic history, a clash between two civilizations that had nothing left to say to each other. Words had failed. Diplomacy had failed. All that remained was fire and fury and the cold mathematics of destruction. The Veth fought with everything they had. Their ships were powerful, their crews experienced, their tactics refined over millennia. They poured fire into the advancing human fleet, and they watched in disbelief as the humans kept coming. The first hour was brutal. Human ships died by the hundreds, their crews giving their lives without hesitation. But for every human ship that fell, 2 Veth vessels were destroyed. The humans fought with coordination that the Veth could not match, their ships moving in patterns that seemed to predict every Veth maneuver. Admiral Tanaka commanded from the center of the formation, her voice calm as she directed the battle. She had studied Veth tactics for 30 years. She knew how they thought, how they fought, how they reacted under pressure, and she had trained her fleet to exploit every weakness. 3rd Battle Group, rotate to bearing 275 and target the enemy flank. 7th Battle Group, provide covering fire. 15th Battle Group, I want those orbital platforms neutralized in the next 10 minutes. The orders flowed from her like water, each one part of a larger pattern that only she could see completely. The fleet responded with perfect precision, each ship knowing exactly what was expected of it. The Veth commanders tried to adapt, but they were fighting a style of warfare they had never encountered. Human ships used electronic countermeasures that blinded their sensors. Human missiles carried warheads that no Veth scientist had predicted. Human pilots took risks that seemed suicidal, but turned out to be exactly calculated. By the third hour, the Veth had lost 20,000 ships. By the sixth hour, they had lost 35,000. Their defensive formations were breaking apart, their command structure fragmenting as ship after ship was destroyed. The humans had lost too. 40,000 ships were gone, reduced to debris that drifted among the stars. Over 1 million human crew members had died in those first hours, adding their names to the list of those who had fallen in humanity's longest war. But the humans did not stop. That was what finally broke the Veth spirit. Every other species the Veth had fought would have retreated by now. The losses were too great. The price was too high. Any rational commander would have accepted that the battle was lost and saved what remained of their fleet. Admiral Tanaka was not any rational commander. "All ships, continue the advance," she ordered. "We do not stop until we have total space superiority." The human fleet reorganized even as it fought, damaged ships falling back, while fresh reserves moved forward. The Veth watched in horror as the formation they had shattered simply reformed and continued attacking. "They should be broken," the Veth fleet commander transmitted to his remaining captains. "Their losses are catastrophic. Why are they still fighting?" He did not understand. He could not understand. The Veth had never faced a species like humanity before. Humans came from a death world, a planet where everything tried to kill them from the moment they were born. They had evolved to endure. They had learned to push through pain and fear and exhaustion. They had survived ice ages that lasted 10,000 years and plagues that killed half their population. They had fought world wars against themselves and somehow managed not to destroy their civilization completely. The Veth had killed 2.3 million of them, and they thought that would be the end of it. They did not realize that humanity had only just begun to fight. The 10th hour of the battle saw the breaking point. A human battle group led by Captain Marcus Chen punched through the center of the Veth formation and reached the primary orbital fortress. The fortress was ancient and powerful, armed with weapons that could destroy a dozen ships with every shot. Chen's group took horrific losses in the approach. Of the 500 ships he started with, only 200 reached the fortress. But they reached it, and they did not hesitate. "All ships, target the fortress reactor core. Fire everything." 200 ships unleashed their full arsenal at a single point. The fortress shields flickered, faltered, and failed. The reactor containment breached a moment later, and the ancient structure that had defended Vethos Prime for 6,000 years vanished in a ball of nuclear fire. The psychological impact was devastating. The Veth had never lost an orbital fortress. They had believed their defenses were invincible. Now they watched one of their greatest symbols of power reduced to spreading debris, and they understood for the first time that they could lose this battle. They could lose everything. The Veth fleet commander made one final attempt to rally his forces. He gathered his remaining ships for a concentrated assault on the human flagship. If he could kill Admiral Tanaka, perhaps the human fleet would lose its coordination. Perhaps they would finally retreat. He was wrong. The assault force was detected long before it reached the Remembrance. Tanaka had anticipated exactly this kind of desperate move. She had positioned her heaviest ships to protect the flagship and laid traps throughout the approach vector. The Veth assault force was destroyed in 17 minutes. Their fleet commander died with his bridge crew when a human missile struck his ship's reactor. After 14 hours of continuous battle, the Veth fleet broke. It was not a controlled retreat. It was a rout. Ships fled in every direction, their crews abandoning formation to escape the relentless human advance. Some tried to surrender, broadcasting emergency signals and cutting their engines. Others fled toward the outer system, hoping to escape into deep space. The orbital defenses fell next one by one. Human ships surrounded them and pounded them into rubble, clearing the space around Vethos Prime of any threat. By the 15th hour, it was over. Admiral Tanaka looked at the tactical display, and saw nothing but debris where the greatest military force in galactic history had once stood. 60,000 Veth ships destroyed. Every orbital fortress reduced to wreckage. The homeworld of the Dominion lay completely undefended. The cost had been terrible. 40,000 human ships were gone. Over 2 million crew members had died in the battle. The human fleet had been reduced to 120,000 vessels. But they had won. Against all odds, against an enemy that had dominated the galaxy for millennia, humanity had won. Every species in the galaxy watched through long-range sensors and hidden probes. They saw the human fleet spread out around Vethos Prime, weapons trained on the planet below. They knew what was coming next. The Veth had burned Meridian 7 to bare rock. Now humanity would do the same to them. It was justice. It was revenge. It was exactly what the Veth deserved. Admiral Tanaka stood on her bridge and looked at the world that had ordered the death of her people. She thought about the children who had died on Meridian 7. She thought about the families who had been erased without warning. She thought about 2.3 million souls who would never see another sunrise. Her hand hovered over the command console. One order. That was all it would take. One order, and Vethos Prime would burn. "Admiral," her tactical officer said quietly, "all weapons are ready. We can begin the bombardment on your command." Tanaka was silent for a long moment. The bridge crew watched her, waiting. Then she did something that no one expected. "All ships," she said, "hold fire." The silence that followed was absolute. Every officer on the bridge stared at her in shock. "Admiral?" Captain Chen asked carefully. "Did you say, hold fire?" "I did." Tanaka looked at the world below, at the 100 billion beings who lived there. "Open a channel to the Veth High Synod. Tell them we need to talk." She turned to face her stunned crew. "The battle is over. Now the real work begins." The Veth High Synod gathered in the Chamber of Eternity, a hall that had witnessed 12,000 years of unbroken rule. The walls were covered with murals depicting Veth, victories against lesser species. The floor was made from stone taken from conquered worlds. Every surface proclaimed the glory and permanence of the Dominion. Now those murals seemed like cruel jokes. The Dominion's fleet was destroyed. Their defenses were rubble. A human fleet circled their homeworld with enough firepower to reduce their civilization to ash. For the first time in their long history, the Veth faced extinction. High Counselor Vethnar rose from his seat of office. He was ancient even by Veth standards. His scaled skin faded to pale gray, his eyes clouded with age. He had ruled the Synod for 3 centuries. He had ordered the destruction of Meridian 7 without a moment of hesitation. Now he had to face the consequences. "The humans wish to negotiate," he said. His voice, once commanding, sounded weak and hollow. "They have not begun their bombardment. They are offering terms." "Terms?" another counselor snapped. "They should be offering their surrender. Our remaining forces are scattered across the galaxy," Vethnar interrupted. "The home fleet is destroyed. We have no ships left that could challenge even a fraction of the human armada." He paused. His ancient eyes filled with something that might have been shame. "We lost. We must accept this truth." "Then we die with honor," a younger counselor declared. "We do not bow to vermin. We have never surrendered in 12,000 years of making others bow to us," Vethnar cut in. 12,000 years of taking what we wanted and calling it right. Perhaps that is why we are here now. Perhaps we forgot that power can be lost. The chamber fell silent. No one had ever heard the High Counselor speak this way. "Open a channel to the human fleet," Vethnar ordered. "I will speak with their admiral myself." Admiral Tanaka appeared on the view screen moments later. Her face showed no emotion, no triumph, no anger, just calm, focused determination. "High Counselor," she said, "thank you for agreeing to speak with me." "You have won the battle," Vethnar replied. "We expected you to begin burning our world by now. Why have you not?" "Because I did not come here to commit genocide. The Veth destroyed Meridian 7 and thought nothing of it. If I do the same to Vethos Prime, I become everything you are. Humanity becomes just another empire built on ashes. Then what do you want?" "Justice. Not revenge, justice." There is a difference even if you have forgotten it. Tanaka outlined her terms. Every counselor in the chamber listened in the stunned disbelief. The Veth would surrender all territory gained through genocide or conquest in the last 1,000 years. This meant returning dozens of worlds to species that had been crushed under Veth rule for generations. The Veth would pay reparations to every species they had harmed, not in currency alone, but in resources, technology, and direct assistance in rebuilding what they had destroyed. The Veth would accept human oversight of their military and government for 1 century, not occupation, oversight, observers who would ensure that the Dominion never again became a threat to galactic peace. The Veth would erect monuments to Meridian 7 on every major world in their territory, not as punishment, but as remembrance, so that future generations would never forget what happened when power was used without conscience. And finally, those who had ordered the destruction of Meridian 7 would face trial, not execution, trial, before a court composed of representatives from every species that had suffered under Veth aggression. "You are asking us to humiliate ourselves before the galaxy," Vethnar said when she finished, "to admit that we were wrong, to submit to judgment." "I am asking you to become better than you were," Tanaka replied. "The Veth have dominated this region of space for 12 millennia. You built an empire on fear and cruelty. Now you have a choice. You can continue down that path and die here, or you can choose a different future. And if we refuse," Tanaka's expression did not change, "then I give the order, and in 12 hours there is no Veth homeworld, no High Synod, no Dominion, just another dead rock orbiting a lonely star." The silence that followed was absolute. While the High Synod debated, Admiral Tanaka faced a different challenge. Not all of her officers agreed with her decision to offer terms. Captain Marcus Chen requested a private meeting aboard the Remembrance. He had lost his wife on Meridian 7. She had been a school teacher in New Helsinki, responsible for 200 children. All of them were dead now, every single one. "Admiral," Chen said, his voice tight with controlled emotion, "with respect, I do not understand why we are negotiating. The Veth murdered our people. They deserve to burn." "Perhaps they do," Tanaka agreed. "But does Vethos Prime deserve to burn? There are 100 billion beings on that world, Captain. Most of them had nothing to do with the decision to attack Meridian 7. They are civilians, farmers, teachers, children. Veth children. Children nonetheless. Are we in the business of burning children now?" Chen looked away, his jaw clenched. "My wife taught children, human children. They were learning to read when they died. They were singing songs and drawing pictures and dreaming about their futures. The Veth took all of that away without a moment of hesitation. Yes, they did. And if we do the same thing to their children, what have we accomplished? We prove that we are exactly what they called us, violent vermin who solve problems with destruction. We would prove that attacking humanity has consequences. There will be consequences, real consequences. The Veth will lose their empire. They will pay for generations. Their leaders will face justice before the entire galaxy. But we will not become them." Tanaka moved closer, her voice softening. "Marcus, I lost people on Meridian 7 too. Friends, family. I feel the same anger you feel, but anger is not a strategy. It is not justice. It is just more pain added to what we have already suffered." Chen was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rough with unshed tears. "Then what is the point? What did we come all this way for, if not to make them pay? To make them change, to make the galaxy change, to prove that humanity is not just another empire waiting to rise. We are something better. We are a species that can hold ultimate power and choose mercy. That is worth more than any revenge. The dead deserve vengeance. The dead deserve to be remembered. They deserve to have their deaths mean something. If we burn Vethos Prime, we become a footnote in galactic history, another species that rose and fell in blood. But if we build something new from this victory, if we create a galaxy where Meridian 7 can never happen again," Tanaka shook her head, "that is a legacy worthy of 2.3 million souls." Chen stared at her. The anger was still there, burning behind his eyes. But something else was there too. Something that might have been understanding. You really believe this is the right path? I believe it is the only path that leads somewhere worth going. Before Chen could respond, an alert sounded throughout the ship. Tanaka rushed to the bridge with Chen close behind. "Report," she demanded. Her tactical officer looked up with a grim expression. "Admiral, we are detecting weapons fire on Vethos Prime. It is coming from Veth military installations." "They are fighting back?" "No, sir. They are firing at their own population centers." Tanaka felt ice form in her stomach. "Explain." "A faction of Veth hardliners has seized control of several ground-based weapons platforms. They are attacking civilian areas across the planet. Initial estimates suggest they are trying to cause maximum casualties." "Why would they attack their own people?" "We are intercepting communications, Admiral." The officer paused, listening to his earpiece. "They are broadcasting a message claiming that humanity has begun the bombardment. They are trying to make it look like we are committing genocide." The trap was elegant in its cruelty. If the hardliners killed enough of their own people, the galaxy would believe humanity was responsible. Every species watching would see the humans as monsters. The victory would be tainted forever. Future generations would remember only the burning, not the mercy that was offered. And if Tanaka did nothing, millions of Veth civilians would die while she watched. She had seconds to decide. "All ships with planetary strike capability, target those weapon platforms immediately," she ordered. "I want surgical strikes only, no collateral damage. Disable those installations before they can fire again." "Admiral, if we fire on the planet, it will look like—" "I know what it will look like. Do it anyway. Those hardliners are killing civilians, and we are not going to stand by while it happens." The order went out. 30 human ships adjusted their positions and opened fire on Vethos Prime. Not on cities, not on civilian areas. On the military installations that had turned against their own people. It was the most precise bombardment in naval history. Each shot was calculated to within centimeters, striking only the hardliner positions while leaving surrounding structures intact. Human targeting computers worked at speeds no Veth system could match, identifying threats and neutralizing them in seconds. But precision had its limits. 3 human ships, positioned directly between the hardliner weapons and the civilian populations they were targeting, took direct hits. They had moved there deliberately, using their own holes as shields to protect Veth cities from Veth weapons. Captain Chen watched as the Morning Star, a ship he had served on early in his career, was struck by a Veth missile that had been aimed at an orphanage. The ship's shields held just long enough for the crew to evacuate, but the vessel itself was torn apart. 63 human crew members died to save Veth children they had never met. The hardliner attack was over in 4 minutes. Every rebel installation was destroyed or disabled. The death toll among Veth civilians was terrible. Over 50,000 killed before the human fleet could intervene. But it would have been millions if not for humanity's response. And every sensor in the galaxy had recorded what happened. They had recorded the Veth hardliners attacking their own people. They had recorded the human fleet moving to protect Veth civilians. They had recorded human ships dying to save enemy children. High Counselor Vethnar contacted the Remembrance 1 hour later. His voice was different now, humbled in a way that 12,000 years of power had never humbled him. "Admiral Tanaka, your ships, they died protecting our people, even after what we did to Meridian 7. "Yes," Tanaka said simply. "I do not understand. Why?" Tanaka thought about the question for a moment. Then she gave the only answer that mattered. "Because protecting the innocent is not something you do for people who deserve it. It is something you do because it is right. Humanity did not come here to become what you were. We came here to show the galaxy what we are." She leaned forward slightly. "Now, about those terms. Do we have an agreement, High Counselor?" The old Veth looked at her through the view screen. For the first time in his long life, he understood that he was speaking to something he had never encountered before. Not an enemy, not a conqueror, something else entirely. "Yes," he said quietly. "We accept your terms, all of them." The war was over. The real work could finally begin. The treaty was signed in the Chamber of Eternity. the same hall where Veth rulers had proclaimed their dominance for 12,000 years. Now it served a different purpose. Now it witnessed the birth of something new. Representatives from over 100 species gathered to observe the signing. Most of them had suffered under Veth rule at some point in their history. They had lost worlds, populations, entire branches of their civilization to Veth aggression. They had come expecting to watch their ancient enemy be destroyed. Instead, they watched something they never expected to see. High Counselor Vethnar stood before the assembly and admitted, in front of the entire galaxy, that the Veth Dominion had been wrong. Not just about Meridian 7, but about everything. About the species they had conquered. About the civilizations they had destroyed. About the fundamental belief that power justified cruelty. "We called other species vermin," he said, his ancient voice carrying through the silent chamber. "We believed that our age and our power gave us the right to do whatever we wished. We were wrong. We were worse than wrong. We were monsters who convinced ourselves that monstrosity was virtue." He turned to face the human delegation, led by Admiral Tanaka. Humanity had every right to destroy us. They had the power. They had the cause. They had the moral authority that comes from having suffered an unforgivable crime at our hands, and yet they chose mercy. His voice broke slightly. "We do not deserve that mercy, but we will spend the rest of our existence trying to become worthy of it." The treaty was comprehensive. Every term that Tanaka had demanded was included, plus additional provisions that the Veth themselves had suggested. They would not merely return conquered territory, they would actively help rebuild the civilizations they had damaged. They would not merely accept human oversight, they would welcome it as a necessary step toward reform. The trials of those responsible for Meridian 7 began 3 months later. They were held on neutral ground in a specially constructed facility that orbited a star far from any inhabited world. Judges from 12 species presided. Evidence was presented from human records, Veth archives, and testimony from witnesses across the galaxy. The verdicts were guilty. They could not have been anything else. The evidence was overwhelming. The architects of Meridian 7 had planned the attack for years. They had studied human colony defenses. They had selected weapons specifically designed to ensure no survivors. They had watched the destruction from their comfortable chambers and celebrated what they called the cleansing of vermin. But the sentences were not death. Tanaka had been clear about that from the beginning. Execution would have been easy. It would have satisfied the hunger for revenge that still burned in many human hearts. But it would have proven nothing except that humanity could kill. Instead, the condemned were sentenced to spend the rest of their lives helping rebuild. They would work on the worlds the Veth had destroyed. They would labor alongside the species they had wronged. They would see every day the consequences of what they had done. It was a punishment far worse than death for beings who had believed themselves superior to all others. It was also a chance, slim but real, for redemption. The years passed. The galaxy transformed. The Galactic Cooperative emerged from the chaos of the post-war era like a flower growing from scorched earth. It began with the species that humanity had helped during the long march to Vethos Prime. The Urani, who had provided intelligence, the Melith, who had shared star charts, the dozen smaller civilizations that had whispered prayers for human victory. They came together not because they were forced to, but because they had seen something they wanted to become. They had seen a species with ultimate power choose mercy. They had seen warriors protect enemy children. They had seen the possibility of a galaxy built on cooperation instead of domination. The cooperative was not perfect. No institution built by living beings ever is. There were disputes and disagreements, conflicts that took years to resolve. But the fundamental principle held: no species would dominate another. No civilization would erase another for convenience. Power would be balanced by responsibility. The Veth themselves changed most of all. It happened slowly, generation by generation, as the young replaced the old and new ideas replaced ancient certainties. The murals in the Chamber of Eternity were taken down and replaced with something different. Images of cooperation, of building, of the shared future that all species were creating together. It was not easy. Many Veth resisted the changes. They clung to the old ways, to the belief that they were meant to rule. but they were increasingly outnumbered by those who had grown up in a different galaxy, who had learned different lessons, who saw the old Dominion as a source of shame rather than pride. 30 years after the Battle of Vethos Prime, something remarkable happened. A delegation of young Veth traveled to the memorial on Meridian 7 to pay their respects. The memorial had taken 10 years to build. It stood on the barren rock that had once held cities and forests and the laughter of children. A vast structure of white stone and black crystal, it contained the name of every person who had died in the attack. 2.3 million names, carved with precision that would last for millennia. Visitors came from across the galaxy, humans who had lost family, species that had suffered similar tragedies, beings who simply wanted to understand what had happened here. They walked through the halls of names and emerged changed, carrying with them a piece of the memory that humanity had decided must never fade. The Veth delegation approached the memorial with visible fear. They did not know if they would be welcomed. They did not know if they had any right to be there. But they had come anyway because they believed it was necessary. Admiral Tanaka was there that day. She was old now, her hair white, her face lined with decades of work and worry. She had spent the years since the war building the peace, serving as humanity's representative to the cooperative, traveling to worlds she had never imagined visiting. She had accomplished more in peace than she ever had in war. But she still came to Meridian 7 every year, on the anniversary of the attack. She still walked among the names and remembered. The Veth delegation found her standing before a section of the memorial dedicated to children. Thousands of names, each one representing a life that should have grown and flourished and contributed to humanity's future. The leader of the delegation was young, barely an adult by Veth standards. She approached Tanaka with the hesitation of someone who did not know if she would be rejected or accepted. "Admiral Tanaka," she said, "I am Veth Sarah. I was not alive when Meridian 7 happened, but I have studied what my people did. I have learned the names of those who died. I have tried to understand the weight of what was taken from your species." She paused, struggling to find words. "I came here to ask a question, one that has haunted me since I first learned the truth about my civilization's history." Tanaka turned to face her. Her eyes were not hostile, but they were not warm either. They were simply tired, the eyes of someone who had seen too much and carried too heavy a burden for too long. "Ask," she said. "Why?" Veth Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "You could have ended us. You could have burned Vethos Prime and wiped out my entire species. After what we did here, you had every right, every moral justification. The galaxy would have understood. Some would have cheered." She gestured at the endless walls of names. 2,300,000 souls, erased without mercy or hesitation. And yet you showed mercy. You chose justice over revenge. You protected our civilians when our own people tried to kill them. Her voice broke. "Why? Why didn't you destroy us?" Tanaka was silent for a long moment. She looked at the young Veth, at the generations of change she represented. She looked at the names carved in stone around them, the people she had failed to save but had honored with everything that came after. "Because the dead don't want company," she said finally. "They want to be remembered. They want their deaths to mean something." She turned to face the memorial, her hand reaching out to touch one of the names, a child who had been 7 years old when she died. "If I had burned Vethos Prime, what would it have proven? That humanity could destroy as effectively as the Veth? That we were just as cruel, just as merciless, just as empty of compassion?" She shook her head. "That would have been the real defeat, not just for us, but for everything these people represented." "What did they represent?" Veth Sarah asked. "Hope, possibility, the belief that the universe could be better than it was." Tanaka turned back to the young Veth. "The people of Meridian 7 built a life here because they believed in tomorrow. They raised children because they believed those children would inherit a galaxy worth living in. They dreamed because they believed dreams mattered." She gestured at the galaxy visible through the memorial's transparent ceiling. Stars beyond counting, worlds beyond imagining. This is what they bought, not with their deaths, but with the response to their deaths. A galaxy where species work together instead of dominating each other. a future where Meridian 7 can never happen again. She met Vethsera's eyes. Your people have changed, not completely, no species changes completely, but enough. Enough to stand here today. Enough to ask these questions. Enough to carry the memory forward and let it shape what comes next. Vethsera was crying now, tears running down her scaled face. I am sorry, she said. I know it is not enough. I know it can never be enough. But I am sorry for what my people did. I am sorry for the universe that might have been if Meridian 7 had lived. I am sorry for the children who never had the chance to grow up. Tanaka did something then that surprised them both. She reached out and took the young Veth's hand. That is why we chose mercy, she said. Not because the Veth deserved it, not because the dead would have wanted it, but because this moment, you standing here, feeling what you feel, becoming what you are becoming. This is what justice actually looks like. This is what victory actually means. She squeezed Vethsera's hand gently. The old Veth would have seen our mercy as weakness. You see it for what it truly was. That difference is worth more than any revenge could ever have been. They stood together in silence, two representatives of species that had once tried to destroy each other. Behind them, the names of the dead stretched on forever. Before them, through the transparent ceiling, the galaxy turned in its endless dance of light and darkness. And somewhere out there, on 1,000 worlds, beings of every shape and origin told the story. They told of the colony that was erased. They told of the fleet that came with vengeance in their hearts. They told of the victory that could have ended in fire. But mostly, they told of what came after, of mercy that transformed an empire, of justice that built a future, of a species called humanity that had power enough to destroy and chose instead to create. They told of what it meant to be human, and the galaxy, slowly but surely, began to learn the lesson that humanity had come so far to teach, not through conquest, not through fear, not through the burning of worlds or the extinction of species, through something far more powerful, through the simple, radical, world-changing act of choosing to be better.